Now that you've found UBN Radio and discovered our quality talk shows, it's time to spread the word to friends, family, and the universe. 24 hours of music and talk. Radio without limits. That's why people keep coming back for more. That's UBNradio.com.
Welcome back to On Air with Tony Sweet's show, Truth Be Told, and I have to say I'm very excited, and it's exclusively on UBN Radio, and it's sponsored by Conscious Life Expo, and it's coming up in February of 2015. Make sure you get your tickets.
Be there.
Be there. Be square.
Be there.
And also, we are sponsored by Adventures Unlimited Press, and make sure you go and pick out some amazing books. There's books of all kind of genres when it comes
be
to
there.
Well, not be there. Just go there.
Go there.
All right. So we're going to go ahead and get started. You ready, Eddie Petty?
I am totally
All right. Well, I'm your host, Tony Sweet, and in our first hour, actually, I got the wrong script.
Actually, we're having an absolutely amazing show. I'm just going to dive in here real quick.
Right.
I'm Walt Lusk, one of the hosts of
Who?
one of the shows here. I'm
You're Walt?
Lusk, show of Dr. Judy WTF, What the Freud.
Oh, I thought you were getting nasty on me.
And I got to tell you, all three of us here in the studio have been hosts and had our own shows, and Tony has worked his tush off on
That's
this
right.
one.
His
It is
sweet
a
tush.
lot
His sweet
of
tush.
work. Yes, Tony has worked his sweet tush off. You should see. There's not much left. So,
Well,
it's a gas to be here.
thank you. Now you embarrassed me there.
Thank
Walt.
you.
Thank you very much. I am excited about this show.
Yeah,
and,
yeah. We all are.
And this show is dedicated to bringing our listeners answers to humanity's biggest controversies and mysteries.
That's right. And I'm Tony's co-host, Eddie Connor. Today we're going to be speaking with two acclaimed experts in the field of ufology.
Absolutely.
In our first hour, we're talking about UFOs and asking questions like, what are the reasons UFOs visit Earth? Are they friendly? We sure hope so. Are aliens really experimenting on humans like the science fiction movies want us to believe? And something that all of your listeners seem to be texting you about is the government really covering up any type of UFO conspiracies that might be proving their actual existence? And if they are, then why?
Well, our first guest is author and paranormal investigator Christopher O'Brien. And Mr. O'Brien has recorded hundreds of unexplained events that were reported in Colorado and New Mexico. And while working in harmony with law enforcement, ex-military members, ranchers, and network of Sky Watchers investigators, he documented one of the most intense waves of unexplained activities ever seen in a single region of North America.
Over a decade of research has led to Christopher's Mysterious Valley trilogy. His field investigation of UFO reports, as well as unexplained livestock deaths and Native American legends, has produced one of the largest databases of unusual occurrences gathered from a single geographic region. His book, Stalking the Herd, is the most comprehensive book ever written on cattle mutilations, and we feel it's destined to be a go-to textbook about this complicated mystery.
I agree with you, Mr. Eddie Poo Poo.
Absolutely.
All right, so well, Mr. O'Brien is on the phone, and he has appeared on over 70. Now, 70.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
TV
shows
shows
and documentaries around the world, including Ancient Aliens,
Coast to Coast,
UFO Hunters,
Inside Edition,
Extra,
and Unsolved Mysteries, to name just a few.
We are so happy that he is with us today. Please welcome Chris O'Brien. How you doing, sir?
Pretty good, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Well, it is an honor, and because this is something that we've started just about 3 months ago. But it's the show, but we've been enthusiasts about this pretty much all of our lives. Walt, Eddie, and I, and so we've had some great people on, and to have you on is another one of those examples of somebody that, like us, that went and actually did it. So we want to get into where you got started and how you.
No, how did you get started?
Yeah, how did you get started in this investigation?
Well, first of all, I moved from back east in 1989 out to Santa Fe, and I only lasted there for about 3 days. And
That explains everything.
There's a lot of wonderful things about Santa Fe. I love the town, but having spent quite a bit of time there over the last 20 years, but when I originally moved out there, it just didn't seem to be a good fit for my girlfriend and I. So we had a couple friends of ours that lived up in Colorado, about 2.5, 3 hours north of Santa Fe, and they had a house with an extra couple, 3 bedrooms, and they said, "Hey, we could use some roommates. Why don't you come on up and see if you like it?" And so we did. We packed everything back in the trailer and packed our vehicles and moved up there. And the San Luis Valley area where I lived for 13 years, from that point on, I left in 2002, is the world's largest alpine valley. It's completely surrounded by mountains. It's probably the most perfect social petri dish that you could ever possibly imagine and hope for when you're getting involved in studying the effects of anomalous events on an unsuspecting, very rural, very remote community. And when I moved up there, I had no desire, no compulsion, no motivation to get into investigating anomalous events or things of that sort. I think my prime excuse me, my primary concern was just finding a job. I mean, this place, literally, I was 60 miles from the nearest stoplight.
Oh.
There's one person for every 7-8 square miles. It's one of the most remote areas in North America, and I was very fortunate to land. Both Deborah and I are very fortunate to land jobs right away. So it seemed like I just felt like that this was a better fit for us, moving, from the East Coast out to the West Coast.
Right.
I am a fifth generation Californian. I was raised in Washington State, and I've really had a love for the mountains, and this seemed like a really idyllic place. There were a lot of musicians there. I'm a keyboard player and had been in and out of bands for many years, and at that point, 10 years. And so, I fell into the routine of working and kind of, I knew a little bit about the history of the place. Of course, the San Luis Valley is the publicized birthplace of the cattle mutilation phenomenon. And I was aware of the Snippy the Horse case from way back when I was 10 years old. I remember hearing about the case. And I always had in the back of my mind, someday I'd love to go visit the San Luis Valley. And when I actually moved there, I figured all that stuff was all ancient history and everything, was just burbling along, with no activity. And, I didn't really have any reason to begin to start poking around into anomalous events because I didn't really hear of any for the first couple, 3 years I was there. And that all changed in late 92, early 93, when we had the onset of an incredible wave of activity that lasted all the way till the end of the 90s. So this would have been about, January 93. At this point, I was a writer for a small town newspaper, and I heard about some UFO sighting, a pretty amazing UFO sighting that happened around Thanksgiving 92. And, I thought, hey, this might be a really cool little article I could write for the local paper. And I had about 2 weeks to do some research. And within a week, I knew I had enough material. I had uncovered this Pandora's box of data and just incredible stories and just a whole potpourri of amazing events that have been documented there over the years, and had very little word of this had ever ventured outside of the San Luis Valley. So, I did my original article, which was about 1,500 words, and within 2 months I was on national TV. So
Wow.
All of a sudden you were an expert,
grew a
huh?
life of its own, and I just
Overnight
happened to be in the right
expert.
place at the right time.
Well, was this something as a kid that you've always wanted or looked
Oh,
at,
yeah.
Into UFOs? Because, I grew up in Kansas, and I did see a UFO when I was a child. My brother, my sister, my mother, all of us did. And that's what really got me and my whole family really interested in that. Did you ever see one as a child?
Not as a child. I didn't have a sighting of craft, but I did have a very unusual experience that I've recounted
Please do tell.
many times before.
Yeah, tell us about that experience, Chris.
Huh?
Tell us about that experience whenever you were
Well, in a
growing up.
nutshell, I was followed around my neighborhood at 3 a.m. by 4 non-human entities, which
Wow.
is kind of freaky sounding on the surface, but
Right.
it was a life-changing experience for me. There was no question in my mind; it was a real event.
No doubt.
I was not sleepwalking. I wasn't having a nightmare. I
No
did
Ambien, nothing like
have
that.
some physical evidence. When I tried to run out the kitchen door when they were following me through the kitchen, I forgot my dad had put the screen door on, and when I opened the back door, the kitchen door, and ran out, boom! I ran into the screen door, and ever since I was 7 years old, and ever since that particular event, I mean, it was life changing. I knew from very early on that our reality is much more complex, and there's other intelligences that are involved in our reality, and I just always since then have had this incredible fascination about paranormal subjects, a whole variety of them. I've got an extensive library I've been dragging around with me for years, adding to it.
and
That's one of the things in life I hate to do the most is to move, because I got to move all my books.
Right.
Yeah,
I
but
hate it when that happens.
I do too, but I'd rather move my books than furniture. That's the truth. So, Chris, I want to ask you a couple of interesting questions. The reason I asked that question is I was hoping you would say what you said, to be honest with you. I have had some of the same experiences you just described, and it's one of those things where it's kind of hard to come out of the closet and talk about that, if you will.
Yeah, well, it took me many years.
That's,
Yeah.
that's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, absolutely.
And do you remember when Wiley Stryber wrote Communion?
Well, yeah. Whitley and I actually had
Whitley.
the same publisher back when I released my first two books, and I've had a chance to talk to him. I had a UFO sighting experience up in New Paltz, New York, in 79, 80,
Yep.
which is right around the time period that his events were beginning. The sighting I had was about 5 or 6 miles, I think, from his cabin. So we did have that in common. That was my first real major UFO sighting that I had with a group of 6 other people. We actually, I conducted a little experiment. We were in the football field in New Paltz. We had just gone to a Gentle Giant concert, and I was laying on my back, and we were smoking some doobs and stuff. But yeah, everybody was fairly, fairly
Coherent.
coherent.
Yeah.
And I'm looking up into
relaxed.
the sky, and I'm noticing that these stars are like moving, and they're just kind of milling around. And I thought, was it my eyes playing a trick on me? And I said to my brother, "Look up there and tell me what you see." And he goes, "Oh my God, those stars are like kind of doing little pirouettes." I said, "Well, yeah, let's do an experiment." So I had my brother turn his back to us, and then the rest of us formed the shape of a square. And the light slowly formed into a square and hung there.
Yep.
Oh,
And I said,
Yep.
"Cool, let's try a circle." So everybody and then we kind of lay on the ground in a circle, and the lights formed a circle. We did a triangle, and then I tried to do 3 wavy lines, but I was going on the old parapsychology card experiment, and that was kind of tough to do. And as we're trying to do this, somebody said, "Well, why are they up there so high? Why don't they come closer?" And all of a sudden, it appeared like they either were rushing down and the lights were getting bigger, or they were flaring up. I couldn't really tell, but it seemed like they were rushing down at us. And as they were doing that, somebody said, "Oh, not that close," and they stopped.
Yep.
And back then, I was doing a lot of psychedelics and stuff, and was really getting into esoterica and ritual magic and studying all sorts of comparative religions. And so this didn't seem unusual to me. In fact, after a while, they just kind of went back up there and became static, and everybody got bored, and we went to a party. So
Yeah. Now,
that was my first UFO sighting, which was, to me, was very, very compelling. But of course, if you live in Manhattan, the last thing that you're going to be talking about to people, are these very toxic subjects. And
Well, come on, it's big
closet
time
buff
cocktail party
by 12 years.
conversation.
Yeah, and you know what's funny too is seriously, Chris, in Manhattan you don't have anybody that's in a quote meditative place where they can relax and sink as much as you're able to relax and sink when you were out at the stadium in the field. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, you can't even see the sky. In
Yeah,
Manhattan.
I know. And so whenever Whitley's book came out, and he got a lot of shit over that. I mean, people crucified this man. I read the book; it scared the crap out of me because I've had some of the same experiences you have. I've seen the ships physically, and I've seen the higher dimension beings that are considered extraterrestrials since I was a little boy, and before I'd ever seen one on television to know what it was. And I'm intuitive, so I know about telepathy and communicating from an energetic frequency to another being that's a higher frequency than we are as human beings. So your reality that you describe is my everyday reality.
Wow.
And I
Well,
think
that's the one thing that really upset me as a little kid was that they wouldn't communicate with me.
yeah.
I kept asking them, "What do you want? What do you want? Why are you following me? Why are you following me?" And they refused. They refused. There was no. It's like I was dealing with blank slates or something. There was no communication or attempted communication at all, to my memory. I am missing, a little bit of time.
Yep.
My sister who found me said about 20 minutes. I think it was more like 40, 45 minutes, but there was no attempt in terms of my conscious recollection of any sort of communication. And of course, I didn't talk about this until fairly recently.
Yeah.
I really about
Years.
8 or 9 years ago, I think I finally kind of went public with this particular event. Of course, my family knew about it, and my description of the beings, I called them stick men with spears. They had these 2 foot glittering wands that had this glittery light in them that I found very fascinating. But ever since then, when putting together a whole network of sky watchers and working with law enforcement and stuff in the valley, as this wave unfolded from '93 all the way to '99, that's 6 years. I mean, I saw dozens and dozens and dozens of events. One night we saw 3 or 4 separate events in a single night. I've had daylight sightings of a small scout ship that zipped right in front of my car, about 150 feet away, 50 feet off the ground. I've seen every shape, size, color of craft. I've seen the big shadows blocking out, significant portions of the sky drifting over. And I meticulously documented all the sighting events that I reported, that were reported to me and that I investigated. And I do have quite a massive database of all this information. I really am trying to approach the subjects that have been popularized on TV with these, this kind of knee-jerk assumption that this is all ETs coming from other planets or other galaxies, other star systems. And the further along I've gone in this process, the further away I seem to be going from the standard ETH or extraterrestrial hypothesis, that I think that we're dealing with something that's probably more terrestrial than we are.
Yes.
Has been here longer than we have. We're probably the aliens, and that's kind of a joke that I pull on people. They say, "Oh, you're the alien guy. You believe in aliens." And I say, "Well, wait a minute. How do you know we're not the aliens and that they're more terrestrial than we are?"
Well, the
I have a hard
Indians
time
that
in
were-
this field
the Indians
dealing
that
with
were
that.
here in this-
Everything is all aliens. They're coming from here, from other planets here. We're so important that these beings are coming here to hijack our emotions, to gather genetic material. I think that's all a crock. I really do. I don't feel. I have a sense that the ETH is probably the least likely scenario that we would be dealing with, and we have to exhaust all closed system potential explanations, I think, before we start jumping off planet.
Well, the Indians
my
believe
soapbox.
and interfaced with aliens, if you will, and they were here before we were here in the United States,
The
North
Native
America.
Americans.
Yeah, the Native Americans. And if you remember the War of the Worlds movie, the most recent one, the aliens came from in the ground. They were already here.
Yeah.
So that is not that outlandish of an hypothesis.
Well, no, and of course, I'm a huge fan, have been for decades, of Jacques Vallée, John Keel, Ivan Sanderson, some folks that looked at this from an out of the box perspective. I think it's anthropomorphic of us to think that we're important enough for anything out there to come here, and it might make us feel good to think that we're that important, and it is something obviously that the media has really promoted and jumped on that bandwagon ever since. Ever since the 1938 broadcast of War of the Worlds by the Mercury Theater and Orson Welles. But I really think that we owe it to ourselves to explore all possible closed system scenarios before we decide to jump off planet and think we're important enough in this primitive, unevolved place for anything out there to come here.
Well,
And
it wasn't that
I'm
long
not
ago.
factoring that out. Of course, it is obviously there's probably billions of civilizations out in the universe.
Yeah.
But I think we're just far enough out from the center of the galaxy that we're kind of out in just past the suburbs. So the chance of something maybe coming here. I think Carl Sagan put it best. He said when they come here, it's there's no doubt it's a big deal. I mean, they arrive and they maybe they did according to Sitchin and in the Bible. I mean, you can interpret these ancient documents in a way to suggest that maybe we did have some sort of contact at some point in our history, thousands of years ago. But it just the whole abduction phenomenon is squirrely to me. I think that there's definitely something going on, but it's nothing like how it's being perceived. The cattle mutilation phenomenon. I've just released probably the most comprehensive book that's ever going to be written about this particular phenomenon. I'm very proud of this book. If I don't write another book, it won't bother me.
Stalking the herd?
The more I study that phenomenon and the more I dovetail my efforts with a dozen other researchers over the years that have been involved in investigating that particular mystery, the more I'm convinced that we're dealing with predominantly a human groups with various agendas, and I use the word in the plural, that are piggybacking their agendas on one another. I won't factor out the possibility of ET involvement, but I mean, what could possibly be the motivation to come here and gather parts for lipinized stew or, udder's reproductive organ souffle? It just doesn't make sense to me. If they wanted to gather genetic material, as Linda Howe and others suggest, that's why they're doing this. Why don't they just pick the lock on a slaughterhouse and they could get as much genetic material as they could ever possibly want? The fact that they're targeting specific animals in specific geographic regions indicates to me that it's the environment that's important. It's where the cattle are located in the environment that's being tested, or
which brings me to this question, Chris. And if you're just tuning in, you're listening to On Air with Tony Sweet. This is our Truth Be Told show. We are absolutely thrilled to death to have Christopher O'Brien here. He's the author of The Mysterious Valley, Enter the Valley, Secrets of the Mysterious Valley. That's his trilogy. And also Stalking the Tricksters and Stalking the Herd. You can find out more about him at the website OurStrangePlanet.com. He's also the co-host of Paracast at GCN Network Radio, and that is theparacast.com if you want to get in touch with Chris. So here's my question for you, Chris, and this just popped in my mind. The area where they're having the most mutilations, just out of curiosity, are these cattle and other animals organically raised, organically grown, or are there any hormones and that sort of thing? Because I would think if there's hormones and stuff, they wouldn't be as drawn to whatever the quote agenda is, both human and or extraterrestrial. That's the first question. Are they pumped full of steroids and hormones, or are these more organic?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. In fact, I've done 30, 40 radio shows, and that's the first time anyone's asked me that, and that's a really good question.
Good job, Eddie.
Hercules!
You get an extra Twinkie.
Good job.
He'll get an extra Twinkie later.
That's a really interesting point. Is the majority of the animals that are targeted, for lack of a better term, are on small ranching operations of under 500 head, and they are free-range animals that are hybridized for the most part. They're not purebred strains, and they may have some, they've been inoculated for particular diseases. In other words, when they grab these calves and they bulldog them to the ground, which I've done more than I care to admit, you give them a shot, to protect them from various bovine diseases. You burn their horns off if they're bulls, and you castrate them for the most part. And other than that, they're just let loose out into a free range scenario. And there's only a handful of cases, 3 or 4, if I remember correctly, that have been reported from feedlots where we have these just
mass quantities,
awful conglomerations of tens of thousands of animals that are walking around in their own effluent, and you have to pump them full of antibiotics so they don't get sick from the conditions, and
Right,
you pump them
right.
full of growth hormones to get them to grow faster, so you can get them out of there and process them. And these animals are pumped full of grain. We use 16 to 1,700 pounds of grain to put 400 pounds of weight on
per
a
animal.
head of livestock before it's slaughtered. And all that grain, if you added it up every year, we could be feeding the 2.5 billion people on the planet that are starving. Getting into the whole issue of cattle in the environment, cattle in health, cattle as a doomed source of protein. I think in the future we're going to be probably outlining cattle as a food source because of the detrimental effect it has on the environment and on human health. And that gets into a whole nother
That's a topic for another
whole
day.
nother subject.
Right.
But yeah, good question. No, these animals are the pure. They don't have all these ingredients put into their systems. They're more pristine.
Well, I have a question because I found that fascinating. You said, if they wanted to come down and just get DNA or whatever they're doing, is they can go to a livestock. But you said you're finding it now. Are you finding certain areas in the country, in the world, that are getting more cattle, mutilations, or what? Where are you finding this stuff?
Well, it's very complex. In North America, it's one thing. In South America, it's something else. In Australia, it's something else. In England, it's a completely different scenario. And most of the animals over there are sheep and horses that are being targeted. So it depends on where you are.
That the
in
cattle
the United
isn't even
States, which seems to be the hardest hit.
So the cattle in India aren't even being attacked, and they're revered over there.
No, there's no reports I can find. A single report I can find.
Which I thought was
India.
really, really interesting. I mean, India's like there's gobs of them, and nobody.
They're the biggest exporter of beef.
Yeah, and
Which
there's no mutilations.
Since they don't eat it, might as well sell it.
I was going to ask.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and you know what's even more interesting is that the type of sacred cow in India is the Brahma.
Okay.
Which is the humped-backed, the jowly,
the Brahma
type of white sacred cow that wanders blissfully around the villages
the
and
countryside
cities of India, for that matter. I haven't found a single case of a Brahma ever being mutilated anywhere in the world.
Yeah,
And
that's
there's lots of Brahma
amazing.
cattle outside of India, and I have not found a single case. I've found every other breed of cow that you can imagine. There's 947 different breeds of cattle that are all derived from a single herd of 80 animals that were domesticated 10,500 BC, which is a whole nother subject. But yeah, it's interesting. In India, I mean, there's 217 McDonald's out of 33,000 around the world, and none of them serve beef.
Oh, wow. And it's probably way healthier food than what we serve here in the United States.
Oh, yeah. They have McAloo, McPaneer. They have all these great Indian
Cheese
fast
Royale.
food dishes that would go great here. They ought to, the marketing people should wise up. You know how many pounds of beef McDonald's processes?
I'm afraid
Pounds or tons?
I was going to say, tons of
1 billion pounds of beef.
Wow.
A billion with a B.
In what period of time?
They're the largest purchasers of beef on the planet. Oh, man. And did you know that if you eat a Big Mac, there could be, or any fast food hamburger for that matter. I don't want to pick on McDonald's.
I'm scared to even hear this.
I don't want to pull an Oprah here and get in trouble.
Right.
But you could have McDonald's. Admits there could be at least 100 different animals' flesh in a single burger, but tests have been done. And they suggest that the number could be 10 times that, almost to a.
Oh my gosh,
to
that's
1,000
definitely a
different
party in your
animals
mouth.
Could be represented in a single patty of.
But it's a quarter pounder before it's cooked.
Right. Yeah.
Well, it's only 12% meat, I think.
Right.
Yeah, there literally is. I know someone who's a chiropractor and a nutritionist, and she puts at the desk when you walk in, there's a Big Mac that's been there since 2010.
And it's not even spoiled.
It's not spoiled, and there's French fries that are there, and they don't tell you how much Clorox they put in the meat.
It's
So
not
you're
Clorox,
telling me
it's
the hamburger
It's ammonia.
there, hasn't been decaying or moldy?
No, it's
oh my
not
gosh.
decayed. It's not moldy, and it's like 4 years old. And thank you for that, Chris. It's ammonia. I'm sorry, not Clorox.
which
it-
when the ammonia interacts with stomach acid, it creates some pretty noxious combinations of byproducts.
But that's okay because the pharmaceutical companies are coming in, ruled by the government, to
Here
take care
they come
of that.
to save the day.
Right. Well, 80% of the antibiotics that are used in this country
Are
a
for
year,
cattle.
80% go into cattle.
Yeah, and we eat that
Wow.
stuff. Yeah, we
And
eat that
that's
stuff.
to
Yeah.
protect them from the horrendous sanitary conditions that they live under in feedlots. These huge
This is just disgusting.
industrial
Yeah.
concentrations of
yeah.
cattle,
Well, my
and a
understanding.
sizable percentage. I think over 50% of the. I think it's 60-something% of the growth hormones that we use go into beef, and people wonder why their little 9-year-old girl is all of a sudden entering puberty.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, bigger than mom.
This is
in terms of
untenable.
certain
We
parts.
cannot continue to go down this
Absolutely
particular
right. Absolutely right.
slope.
My
There's a-
understanding, though, the mutilations have been toned down. There's less. Is that a misnomer?
I think it might be. It appears that way because for so many decades, when a rancher had one of these cases, or a number of them, nothing happens except getting grief if he reports it. I mean, he knows that nobody is going to be able to come up with an answer. He's not going to get his dead head of livestock back. It's already a lost investment. So I think a majority of these cases are now not being reported.
So there's just as many, maybe they're just not being reported.
Yeah, and the higher strange the case, the less likely it will be reported. It's the cases where there's helicopters seen, or hooded figures, or strange vehicle traffic around the ranch. The cases where the rancher thinks he's been singled out and victimized by humans. Then the chances are he may report it because they're angry about it. But the high strange cases, the ones that freak them out, are the ones that sometimes they won't even tell their own family. They'll drag it off to a bone pile, they'll burn it, they'll bury it with a backhoe, out of sight, out of mind. They don't want their neighbors or other ranchers to know that they've been victimized and then singled out. There's a stigma attached to this. Rural ranching communities tend to be very conservative. They tend to be very tight-lipped and closed-mouthed.
Old school, in the box, traditional.
Yeah, very, very traditional, and it's really, I think we're seeing a cessation of reports. I think the activity has faded off quite a bit, obviously since the 70s, when we had as many as 8 states in one night were reporting cases. We're not seeing the levels of mutilations reports that we saw back then. But 1975 was also the peak year where there were more cattle in North America than any other year, and Americans were eating more beef than any other time. And that it's been a downward curve ever since then. And as the numbers of animals out there in the pastures and the pounds of beef that Americans have eaten has fallen off drastically. Since the 70s, we've seen a corresponding sort of bell curve response in cases of these mutilations falling off as well.
Well, that's because us baby boomers don't have as many Big Mac attacks anymore.
Yeah, well, just God, careful what you put into your bodies out there, listeners.
Seriously.
I am not a vegetarian. I love beef. I love meat, but I'm just, I'm fortunate in that I live in a rural community here in Arizona, and I know I can get meat and I can get dairy and eggs from local suppliers where I know where they come from, and I know it's free range, that these animals are not getting pumped full of all these nasty antibiotics and growth hormones and that sort of thing. And I'm very, I'd rather spend twice as much and eat half as much.
That's why I feel the same way. That's one reason I go to Whole Foods, even though sometimes I wonder about, even chains like that, because so many people that they as soon as it says organic or whatever, it's good for you. And we're like, you have to step back and really do your research.
Do your homework.
You mentioned, you talked a little bit about mad cow. You want to touch on that for a moment? Since we're kind of on the
I
subject?
think that's one of the big
mad cow disease.
Yeah, that's the 600-pound gorilla that's been sitting on our coffee tables since the mid 60s.
Yeah,
I do go into quite a bit of detail looking at the history of prion disease, which is the misfolded protein that creates full-blown mad cow or Creutzfeldt-Jacobs in humans, scrapie in sheep, chronic wasting disease in deer. It's all basically the same thing. It's a transmissible spongiform encephalopathy that turns nerve tissue and brain tissue into Swiss cheese, like holes in it. And you twitch out, you lose synaptic function. The body forgets to tell itself to breathe. Most people who get Creutzfeldt-Jakob or variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease die from pneumonia and other opportunistic infections. But there's a growing body of evidence that suggests that this particular type of disease was actually an escaped, weaponized pathogen that accidentally escaped out into nature. And Colm Kelleher, who is the managing director for the National Institute for Discovery Sciences, NIDS, the Robert Bigelow group that bought that Skinwalker Ranch up in Utah. And Bigelow, of course, now has Bigelow Aerospace. He's the only private individual with an orbiting space station. Well, Colm was a microbiologist that was his managing director for NIDS. And he wrote a book that I really recommend called Brain Trust, which traces the history of prion disease and how these infected brains were brought back from New Guinea to weapons labs, and how inadvertently some of these prions escaped into the environment. Now we're talking about a nasty little bug here,
to say the
for lack
least.
of a better term. It's the smallest life form yet detected by humans, 1,000 times smaller than the smallest virus. Once you get, once the prions start misfolding, it's 100% fatal. It makes AIDS look like a bad cold. I think one researcher kind of coined that particular term. It's really horrific. And if we do have prion disease out there in the food chain, obviously somebody's going to want to monitor that, and they're not going to want to make a big deal out of it. I think the only cases that have been reported in North America have been inadvertently admitted to because there's been a collection of cases. And Colm does a great job in showing the correlation between the outbreaks of prion disease in the environment and the mutilation phenomenon. And I think that he really opened up my eyes. I had always suspected a link from the mid to late 90s when prion disease was just ravaging the UK herds over in England. In fact, at one point by 98, they had destroyed and cremated 4.5 million animals. Every head of livestock in the British Isles was exterminated and cremated. And at the time, they didn't realize that the prions could survive heat up to 2,500, 3,000 degrees.
Amazing.
And all this
That's
bone
scary.
ash. Nobody knows what happened to it.
That's scary.
So, this is a whole, to me, this is a real smoking gun, possible,
Time bomb.
well, it's a possible motivation for these teams to go out and mutilate animals. It could be the real smoking gun sort of motivation to have an environmental monitoring program. But another thing that we've uncovered, myself and my research associate and mentor, David Perkins, is when animals are exposed to prion disease and also environmental radiation, in other words, being downwind of the Nevada test site all through the Midwest and upper Midwest, and downwind and downstream of nuclear power plants, weapons enrichment facilities, uranium mines. That's where you find the highest concentration of mutilation reports and regions that are hardest hit. And what we're discovering is that prion disease may be kickstarted into going into full-blown symptoms by environmental radiation.
Oh, God.
So you have these two elements combining together, which is a little scary.
Well, especially in light of Fukushima that just happened, 3 years ago?
Exactly. And we're wondering, there's not many cases that are, let's say, except for Idaho, parts of Montana. This is generally the mutilations. The main areas of high incidence were on the eastern side of the Continental Divide, and that doesn't totally hold true. There were cases in Arizona. There were some cases in Utah. There were cases in Idaho, but those cases were downwind of the Nevada test site. If you go west of there into California, Oregon, Washington, relatively speaking, you don't have near the number of cases during the big waves of the 70s that we saw in the Midwest and Rocky Mountain states, all the way out to Betty Hill, the famous abductee, investigated
Yes.
one of two known
Yes.
cases that
Yes.
happened in New Hampshire, for instance, which
Yeah.
I include in the book, and she did a great job too. Uh, So I think this is a downwind, downstream of where we utilize and radioactive materials, and you add into the soup the possibility that that could be a Kickstarter for creating full-blown prion disease, and you have a very disturbing potential scenario. I chuckle about it because I'm fortunate enough where I don't have to rely on fast food like many people in the urban areas of the country have to.
Right.
That's right. Yeah.
It's very convenient, but the beef industry is a huge political force, and
Absolutely
it's
it is.
probably the most powerful lobby in this country that you never hear anything about.
I was going to ask you about the politics around that and how it relates to what you're doing.
Well, I just make sure everybody knows that I am not saying don't eat beef. I'm saying, just be aware of where it comes from.
Yes.
Spend a little more, eat a little less.
Yes.
Is my admonition. In '99, I think Oprah had Howard Lyman, the mad cowboy, who was really promoting this whole idea that we should really be concerned about mad cow disease in the United States. She had him on her show, and at one point she was so aghast at the information, she blurted out, "I'll never eat another hamburger again." I mean, that simple sentence landed a $2 billion.
Yeah, she paid a big price for that one.
Big price.
$1 million to beat it, but
she
I
did.
don't have $1 million to fight the beef industry.
Yeah, but the sad part about that, Chris, is then our country had to deal with Dr. Phil after that because he helped her out of it.
He was the one that got her out of the jam. Yeah, in some respects, that's correct.
And so, Chris, I don't mean to jump ship at our subjects, but I'm dying to ask you this question about since you've been up in Colorado and you have this amazing life, and of course we're saying it's amazing. We know there's a lot of blood, sweat, tears, research, and time and effort and energy.
100,000 miles on my truck in 6 years.
Yeah, and so you're obviously passionate about it, but I really want to know about the Native American legends and if you've had any connection, association meetings, powwows, and I mean that politically correct, with Native Americans up there in connection to the mutilations or the UFOs.
Well, yeah, I have. This has been one of my real passionate sort of side investigative channels and research projects. I have made some headway in gaining the confidence and the trust of certain Native Americans who I have been introduced to. Clifford Mahooty is one of my dearest friends. He moved down from his reservation into my town. We spend a lot of time together. He's the first Zuni elder that has opened up and started talking about the Pueblo Indian traditional knowledge as it relates to the star beans, the kachinas,
Yes.
some of their healing techniques, some of their medicine society information. Grandfather Martin, Gashria Somo from the Hopi reservation, was the first elder that I really became fairly close with. And he opened up and talked a lot about Hopi prophecy. I've got some contacts on the Navajo reservation, the Dene. Of course, they're recent arrivals to North America. They've only been here since about 100 years before the Spanish. The Hopi and Zuni are more than likely they're the primordial cultures in North America. The Hopi claim they've been here for tens of thousands of years in various through the first, second, third world. Now we're in the fourth world, and Clifford Mahooty is just an amazing individual. I've really I've gone out of my way to support his coming out, being the first Zuni to really get on television to talk about their sacred traditions. I'm attempting to put together several projects with him that are going to help the Zuni people and hopefully other Indian tribes document their cultures with video equipment, train them, give them the equipment, and show them how to produce their own video so that they can document their cultures before they die. If we don't do this quickly within the next 5-10 years, many of these cultures that are ancient cultures are going to wither on the vine. The kids are playing video games. Their pants are down around their ass. They got their hats on
I
sideways. They
know.
got gold chains. They're playing video games. They're, aspiring L.A. Compton gangster rappers. They're not learning their language. They're leaving the res as soon as they're old enough. And it's really sad that these very, very beautiful and I think the knowledge that some of these cultures have is so deep and so pure that it would be really a shame if this last generation of traditionals dies off and they are unable to pass on their traditional knowledge. And we're seeing that every year. They're losing little chunks.
It's not a shame; it's a crime.
It is.
It is a
And
crime.
Yes.
of course, the government has really been
Assholes.
very responsible for that. The
Yes,
U.S. government.
absolutely. And, it is a crime. And I love your idea about going in there and sort of getting some of the younger Native Americans reinterested in what the world loves about their culture and who they are as a people, especially lovers of the earth. So really quick, I just want to go in. If you're just now tuning in to On Air with Tony Sweet's show, Truth Be Told, we're here today with the amazing Christopher O'Brien. He's written 5 or 6 books, a whole trilogy around the Mysterious Valley trilogies. He also has another book, Stalking the Tricksters, and yet another one called Stalking the Herd. You can find out more about him on OurStrangePlanet.com. He's also the co-host of the Paracast at GCN Network Radio. You can learn more about him at theparacast.com. Now, we have a bunch of people in the chat room that want to ask you a question, Chris.
Sure.
Yeah, Chris, we have some people that are really interested in what you're talking about, with pretty much every subject we've mentioned today. But one, Sheila was asking, when you said the fourth world, she says the first, second, third, fourth. What is that when it comes to the Indian nations?
Yeah, there are various Native American traditions around North America and around the world for that matter that talk about major stages of humans' existence going back into the prehistory. And basically, the earth has a habit of cleansing itself every 10, 20,000 years. And I think the end of the first world, and it varies from tradition to tradition, but basically it's fire, earthquakes, ice, and flood. In a combination of those things, basically they all agree that the third world was destroyed by flood, which would be the flood of Noah, of that ilk. And there's I think over 1,000 different versions of the flood legend around the world. So I think a lot of people and historians agree that there was a cataclysmic.
Well, it was documented in all 4 corners. Yeah, very much so.
Before that,
It's been
it was
documented.
ice.
Yeah.
Before that, it was in some traditions wind, in other traditions earthquakes, and other traditions they talk about other calamities. So there's some. The further back you go, the less the traditions will agree on how the earth was destroyed. But what's interesting in the Pueblo Indian tradition, which is what I've been mostly referring to here with the Hopi and Zuni. I live in the Southwest. I live in Arizona, so I've been more concerned with diving into that particular traditional knowledge. So, and they claim that Creator is able to warn the people when it's time to cleanse the world again and start anew, and they are led underground. They're given a series of signals, of warnings, and then they're led underground where they're protected while the earth cleanses itself. And that process could be many generations. And when they reemerge and their genetics are retweaked, the last time we came out, we had webbed hands, bulging eyes. We were very sensitive to light because we've been underground. We were starting to develop tails. For instance, we called the mud people. And so when it's safe to repopulate the earth, then the people are led back out of the ground, and they're divided up into clans and groups, and then sent off into the four directions. The Hopi say, for instance, that the Olmec or the Maya later were Hopi that were sent south that forgot to return.
Interesting.
So
That
you have
is
this
interesting.
wonderful allegoric, kind of stories, but there is some evidence to back up these particular stories. which I find very fascinating. And I have done an amazing amount of work actually in research, digging into this traditional knowledge and then getting a firsthand personal version of it from elders. Around doing is writing or documenting the Zuni traditional knowledge, which pretty much encompasses the whole Pueblo Indian system of the Four Corners, and coming up with a book written by Native Americans, by Clifford or a series of writers, and then help facilitate getting that information, and documenting their wonderful heritage and their oral tradition and their sacred star knowledge. They have an incredible.
Now that we're
Our
cutting, you're cutting out just
our
a little
broadband
bit.
got goofy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
right.
if you can hear us, we can't hear you right now, but we have another question from the chat room.
We do have another question, and Chris, I hope you're still listening, and I hope you can still hear us, because
Or hang up and call back.
I think we may have lost him there.
Can't hear me now?
Oh, there we
Oh,
go. Hey, we made it. He made it back.
Welcome back. We missed you.
I think we lost him again.
No, I'm here.
Oh, no, you're. Oh, good.
yay.
Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left, and I wanted to ask one more question. I'm sorry that that cut out there for a second, but we have a question, and she wants to definitely a question about the Bible. She says, "What's your opinion?" Because I know we talked about the Hopis and kind of little Native American religions and their spirituality, but what we're talking about today, how does it relate to the teachings of the Bible? What is your thoughts about
How's it
that?
correlate?
Yeah, how's
or,
it correlate?
or
with it?
relate?
Well, I was born and raised a Catholic, Irish Catholic, and I must say, in ninth grade, I was one of the few people you'll ever hear that the Jesuits gave up on with prejudice.
With prejudice.
I do have some real concerns and issues with organized religion in general, and Christianity is an organized religion, and
Right.
I would be willing to debate anybody on many aspects of the cultivation of spirit and the control mechanism that religion provides.
Peter is not the first pope?
Organized religions are an outmoded way of viewing spirituality. They're providing, in the Christian sense, they're providing a intermediary between you and your spiritual center and the divine. I'm more of a Gnostic in that way. I think I have a personal responsibility to have my own personal connection with the divine. I think the Bible is a wonderful propaganda tool for control. I think it's they've estimated there's as many as 60 different people that wrote it. If you look at the history of how the Bible evolved, especially the New Testament and the lack of the former New Testament, the Apocrypha, the Greek Bible with the Book of Moses, the Book of Peter, those books were totally, Constantine and the First Council of Nicaea in 367, I think, or whenever, decided that, hey, we need a New Testament here, and I just have a lot of problems with the whole biblical way of looking at things. I love the wonderful messages of Jesus,
Yes.
and the integrity of the golden rule: do unto others as others would do unto you. I think there's some very basic spiritual, wonderful spiritual tenets that we should all be living by.
Yes.
But when it comes to the actual control mechanism that Christianity and Islam and especially the Western religions and Near Eastern religions, these are control systems. I'm much more. I tend to drift over towards Taoism, and Buddhism, especially certain aspects of Tibetan Buddhism. That's much more in lines with my personal spiritual life. I think that the Bible, again, has some wonderful stories in it. But if you look at it and you read the Bible, I mean, gosh, we can have slaves, we can, kill people, we can
Women are
do
second-class
this, we can do
citizens.
that, all these terrible things. People are very selective when they look at the Bible. They forget that there's a lot of real nastiness in there. We have a wrathful Old Testament deity that kind of gets kind of gets softened, I think, and more politically correct as you go into the New Testament. And I do in my book, Stalking the Herd. I look at spirituality and the organized the creation of organized religions, and they were all originally based around the mother and the Earth Mother, and then it was a matriarchal system, and then it started to go into a patriarchal system with the reverence of the bull and the cow, and that's a really important subject that I cover in the first chapter of my book.
Well, and you, Chris, listen, seriously, let us know when you're coming into L.A.
Oh,
'Cause
absolutely.
we'd love to have you in
We
studio.
truly-
You're such
in
a fascinating
studio.
man.
I know. And for listeners just tuning in, we are literally talking right now with Christopher O'Brien. He's talking right now about Stalking the Herd and then Stalking the Tricksters. These are his books. How can we get in touch with you on social network? We know about your website, ourstrangeplanet.com, and we also know about your radio show, theparacast.com. Are there other ways listeners can get in touch with you, Chris?
Well, not really. I've had
He's like, that's it.
tweet and do all this, and I'm too busy. And actually, I think tweeting is a little I don't know. It's a little kind of ego oriented. I'm not a person that has any need to be proselytizing and sharing all my wisdom. Every 5 minutes during the day. So so you can't. I don't tweet.
What? No Facebook page?
Or twerk, for that matter. So, those are the best places. OurStrangePlanet.com or theparacast.com. We have a great radio show, or every week on Sundays we have great guests. Our forums are really cool. A lot of people way smarter than me there, and we do have an archive of almost 350 shows, all for free.
Thank you
That is
so
great.
much.
Wow.
And, well,
Cool.
thank you so much, Chris.
Yay.
Everybody, we hope you go follow him, go to his website, listen to his radio show, and enjoy more conversations with Chris.
Yeah,
Please come
thanks
back
a lot,
anytime.
guys, for having me on.
If you're in the neighborhood,
I'm gonna
look us up.
go ahead and get Clifford on the line for you, so you can talk to Clifford, in the first person. And
I would love
if you like,
that.
I can help him out a little bit too. But
Of course.
it'd be great to get Clifford on and share his knowledge and wisdom.
Oh, it'd be an honor. So thank you so much for that, Chris.
Hey, Chris,
Yeah,
thanks.
no problem.
All right,
Thanks so
take care.
much.
Have a great day, and we'll talk to you
Good
soon.
weekend.
All right, you guys, thanks for having me on.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh my God, I love that. Love him. Thank you guys for sticking around and enjoying this with us, because it's we're enjoying it, I think, as much as our listeners are
yeah.
enjoying it. I really didn't say as much because I'm so fascinated and trying to soak in and all the information he's given us, and he is definitely well worth listening to. So
Just don't get mad cow on us, okay?
I can twerk cow or twerk a cow maybe.
I can tweet Cal.
Holy cow.
So I think we are going to take. You want to take a quick break and we can go to pee break, and then when we come back, we're going to have an amazing guest. If you've been interested in the Freemasons at all, this is the show that you want to tune in.
Don't
for.
touch that dial and
Yeah.
stay tuned.
And if you touch it, all you're going to do is just turn it up, because that's what we like. All right, don't go anywhere. On air with Tony Sweet. Truth be told on UBN Radio.
Just because I'm losing doesn't mean I'm lost. Doesn't mean I'll stop. Doesn't mean I'm across. Just because I'm hurting doesn't mean I'm hurt. Doesn't mean I didn't get what I deserve. No better and no worse. I just got lost. Every river that I tried to cross, every door I ever tried was locked. Just waiting till the shine wears off. You might be a big fish
see Jesus, see Judas, see Caesar, see Brutus, see success is like suicide. Suicide is a suicide. If you succeed, prepare to be crucified. Media medals, niggas sue you, you settle. Every step you take, they remind you you ghetto. So it's tough being Bobby Brown. To be Bobby then, you have to be Bobby now. Now the question is to have had and lost better than not having it all? Because
just waiting till the shine was on. Just waiting till the shine was on.
We are back with On Air with Tony Sweet, only on Universal Broadcasting Network.